Welcome back, Ty and That Guy. My name is Wes Chatham, and this is my good buddy, Ty.
And today we're talking about episode 508 of The Expanse, Hard Vacuum, with written by Dan Nowak and directed by Marisol Adler.
So now that we know Naomi made it, thank God, I was curious. So she gets exposed to radiation, and she makes it to the ship. She puts in oxygenated blood, so she survives at that point. How going further, if she doesn't have any interference, like how does that radiation, how much longer does she have to live until she gets medical intervention?
What it would actually be is just an incredibly severe sunburn.
Mm-hmm.
There's no atmosphere. There's no magnetosphere, protecting you from the sun. The other sort of physical effects she has is, there's a swelling under the skin in her hands. So that's why her hands look big and puffy. Swelling in her face.
When she was going in to check the wiring for the message, and she was making marks on the wall, was that something to do with cabin pressure? How many times she comes in?
It was, yeah. That's exactly right. So the idea is there's only so much air in the ship, and every time she uses that airlock to get out of the pressurized part of the ship and into the unpressurized part between the hulls, whatever amount of air is in that airlock is gone. So we have a scene where she's looking at a little plate on the wall that says the cubic volume of that airlock. And you see her sort of mentally do the math of how much cubic volume of air is in the rest of the ship and how much she's going to lose every time. And so she's sort of figuring out how many trips outside do I get before I'm out of air. So the marks are to keep track of every time she has vented some air, because you're never getting it back. The air is getting thinner and thinner. And she plays over the course of episode 8. She plays that she's getting weaker and weaker. Every time she comes in, she's more and more exhausted because every time she comes back into the cabin there's just less air around her.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Also, I want to talk a little bit about Avasarala. I think she has a really interesting moment when they're talking about the strategy going forward. And Delgado, he wants to go right into Pilot Station. And Avasarala kind of pushes back against that, which I don't know if, Avasarala at the beginning of the series would have made that choice.
In season 1, she's definitely very pro-Earth at the expense of everyone else. And she does grow and change. But even early on, she's always sort of wanted to preserve civilian life.
To talk a little bit about Drummer's character, we in this episode, we really see her struggling with the choice that she made to side with Marco. And she has that scene about saying that they're scavengers, that they're picking these, the belters clean or the ships clean that Marco. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, so this entire season is about putting Drummer in this impossible situation. She is a belter. She's a very nationalistic belter, very patriotic belter. And has always been a big proponent of belter rights and belter freedoms and all of that stuff. So on paper, what Marco is doing is advancing her cause. They should be allies. But she also knows that he's a murderous psychopath. Mm-hmm. And she does, and she quit working for Fred because she felt like he wasn't good for the belt. She quit working for Anderson Dawes because he wasn't good for the belt. She sees in Marco the worst versions of all of the things that she quit working for those other guys. I think she's deeply suspicious of Marco and what his motives are and ultimately what he's going to do. Mm-hmm. At the same time, she has to recognize he is the power in the belt. If she makes the choice to openly defy him, her ships are going to be the ones that are getting picked over by scavengers. Mm-hmm. And she knows that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a really uncomfortable situation she finds herself in, where the guy who should be her ally is somebody she can't stand, and she's forced to deal with him anyway to protect this family that she has, this new family she has. And her family is important to her, and she wants to protect them.
Also living with the guilt where she could have ended it, and she made the choice to keep Marco alive. And, the ambiguity of, is this, like you said, he's furthering the cause of the belt. He's doing this, but he's also a murderous psychopath, and he killed millions on Earth. And I'm not really behind this. So that kind of her, like you said, the most struggling with this most difficult decision and choice, also complicated by the love and the relationship she has with Naomi and knowing their history of their relationship.
That is one thing that we wanted to play. You know, she and Naomi are very close. It's very clear that Naomi told her about Marco, told her about Philip. You know, we don't see it happen on camera, but it's very clear from the subtext that they had those conversations. You know, to be confronted with this guy that she knows kidnapped Naomi's kid.
It's a great scene too when she first sees Naomi's son walk and she recognizes him immediately, and it changes her demeanor. She sees him. She was very good in that scene, and that's a really
Well, Kara's, you know, a fantastic performer, so you know, she's always going to nail those moments. But yeah, I mean, I you know, you think about that, and like if somebody you knew had done something terrible to a good friend of yours, I mean, how hard would that? I mean, that would be really tough to get past, right?
Right. But we have a special guest today, Daniel Abraham. Everybody that does not know Daniel, he is a homebody. And I love getting to talk to Daniel and hanging out with him, but we don't get to do it much because he will be there for the bare minimum. And as soon as he's done, he's back to New Mexico.
If I can bring the family with me, I'll stay there forever. I just, you know, I need my people.
When did you guys first meet?
Was it Bubonican?
It was Bubonican. Yeah.
Bubonican. All right. And then, so Bubonican's the local kind of regional science fiction convention here in Albuquerque. When he moved to town, one of the women in the critique group that I was in was saying, "Oh, my friend has moved to town. Everybody be nice to him." And I don't think I did a great job of that.
The Expanse is something that you were like, this would be an idea that you were kind of thinking would be an interesting game, and you were bringing friends over to kind of experiment with it and flesh it out.
Yeah. I mean, I was definitely play testing the idea because the idea had originally been a video game setting, and so just play testing, see if there's, you know, if it's possible to make good stories in it, to see if it's possible to come up with interesting things to do.
Yeah, that was just me and Ty and our wives. It was just 4 people playing in that one.
And what was your first impression of it? The idea
of the role-playing game?
Yeah.
I thought, holy shit, he's done all the hard work. This is amazing. No, he had like a binder full of the information about what everything was and where all the stations were and how it all fit together. And anytime I asked him any question, he knew the answer to it just immediately. Ty had done all this amazing work, world building this gigantic, gorgeous setting. And I was like, you know, this has got everything you need for a book. I know how to write books. Let's just, you know, do this real quick and it'd be fun.
And was Ty on board right away, or was he like, eh?
He thought about it because it's not something you want to just jump into.
Now imagine if I could travel back in time and I was at that moment and I told you guys what the Expanse was going to become.
I would have been very gratified to hear that and not believed you, but that'd be fine. I don't think Ty would have been surprised.
Yeah, Ty, that's what Ty was thinking about. He's like, do I have time to do a successful television show and book series? And that's because he knew if he put his hands
like, yeah, you know.
My life has been one long series of incredibly unlikely events. Way back in the day, at one point I just turned it down. I said, you know, we're going to get a TV show, right? And he was like,
yeah, you know, no, that'd be cool. That'd be great. I'd be happy if it happened.
And then after season 1, when they were like, well, you know, we're not sure. I was like, we're going to get a season 2.
Well, you know, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Could be, maybe not. We'll see. And then, yeah, we did.
You guys just really work so well together. You guys have a similar sense of humor. You guys have respect for each other. You just have this, you know, great, I mean, you guys probably behind closed doors, you know, scream and yell at each other, but I don't ever see it. So, you know, Ty has this game. You said it, you know, you thinks it would make a great book. So let's start working on it. How do you guys start to dial in, like, you know, figure out how you work together, and then what does that process look like?
Well, my first idea for how this was going to be is I'd go over and he'd tell me what happened and I'd write it, and that would be just how he did it, because I'd written a bunch of books and that was the expertise that I had. And I turned out I think it was the prologue. I don't think it was the first chapter.
It was the prologue in the first chapter.
So both of them.
Yep.
And Ty said, these are really well written, but they're not right. They're very good, but they're not right. You got to let me take a swing at it. And of course, that's fine. So After that, we started doing this thing where Ty would write half of the chapters, I'd write half the chapters. Each of us would edit the other guy's stuff, and we'd talk through the stories.
Now that you've written the book and now you're on the show and you're getting into screenwriting, what was that transition, right? Have you guys written any screenplays before going into that?
I mean, we'd played around with it. We didn't know what we were doing.
You know what's funny is I remember Ty first season, and I remember him coming on set and kind of being around and just really taking everything in, going to every meeting, kind of learning everything. In the second season, he would kind of say a little bit more to everything. Third season, he would be a little bit more about. Fourth season, it's like, he was running things. So it's like, is that kind of like, what did you guys think of the process? Like transition from writing books to writing screens to plays to producing?
So the only thing that keeps my interest is if I don't know how to do something and I think I can learn it. Mm-hmm. So the way I learn things is I watch without talking. And then when everybody else leaves, I would ask Narain, okay, when you said this, what did that mean? And when he was asking that question, what was he really asking? And yeah, like by season 3, I was producing episodes, and by season 4, I was producing episodes when Narain was in LA.
Yeah, I'm behind the curve on that part. That the on-set production, I was not on set anywhere near as much as Ty was. The thing though that I've kind of fallen in love with is post-production, especially film editing. Film editing is the part of this whole process that is most like writing a novel or a short story. On set, it took me a long time to kind of understand what a producer was doing and what the job actually was and what exactly I was supposed to be doing there in the cold, sitting on this uncomfortable chair for like 12 hours. I get it now, but it took a long time for that penny to drop for me.
Yeah, I think what I learned from you guys is that you guys, at your core, at your source, are storytellers. When you started The Expanse, did you know how it was going to end, the whole series? So you started book 1. Did you know how the whole thing was going to end?
We didn't know how the whole thing was going to end until about halfway through book 2.
I knew sort of in very, very general terms from the game when I was doing it as a game that where the big things were going, what the big sort of universal size plot moves were, but all of the details was Daniel and I figuring it out.
Yeah,
while
we
wrote book 2.
We nailed like what the last scene of book 9 was going to be.
Yeah,
while we were doing book 2.
So I'm good with titles and last lines in the book. Daniel does everything in the middle.
Not the action. I don't do the action. I got better with the action, but that's
all I have to do is come up with a title and a last line, and then I'm like, all right, Daniel, go.
And then and it's like, okay, and I'll say, okay, so what if instead of a gunfight we have some guy just sitting around meditating on death? Would that be cool? Would that yeah? And Ty says, no, we have to have a gunfight. It's like, okay. Right.
I mean, he's joking, but there is an element of truth to it.
Joking.
What did you read? Like, what are the main stories, movies, books? What are the things that really made you fall in love with storytelling and wanting to be a writer?
My dad read to me all the time. I read all the time. I read all the Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries, all the Dorothy Sayers mysteries. I read a bunch of Arthur Clarke and Larry Niven. And
so Arthur Clarke is kind of what introduced you to...
Arthur Clarke's short story, The 9 Billion Names of God, was what introduced me to science fiction. I still remember getting to the end of that short story. I know where I was when I finished it. So
and is that the movies that you loved and TV that you loved as well?
Oh, I had no taste. I had no critical anything. I was watching The Love Boat and Fantasy Island and Twilight Zone, whatever was there. Gomer Pyle. I was just pouring all that shit in my head.
You can't throw in Twilight Zone and Love Boat the same.
Oh no, you can. You see, that's just like, oh, I would like this very sophisticated dish and also these marshmallows. Now that was me.
But we're the same age, and that was what was on TV when you got home from school. Mm-hmm. When I got home from school, you got Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Yep. Addams Family.
Love Boat and Fantasy Island.
Those were the Friday night double feature.
You got what was the Love American Style?
Oh God, I remember that one.
That one was on.
Yeah.
Like that was just what was. Oh, and Brady Bunch. That was just what was on TV. So you got home from school. There was like 5 hours of TV. It was the same reruns every day in the afternoon.
I didn't hate Love Boat. They had some nice little stories in there every now and then.
No, it was cheesy because it was 70s, 80s. It was a different time. But
so when you say Twilight Zone, are you talking about the 80s Twilight Zone? Or are you talking about the OG?
Rod Serling.
Oh, Rod Sterling.
Yeah.
You know, I own every Twilight Zone ever made, and also the scripts to every Twilight Zone ever made, and then the companion book to that talks about the behind the scenes of every Twilight Zone ever made. When I started watching Twilight Zone, I remember staying at my grandmother's house, and they were doing a marathon, Twilight Zone marathon, and I stayed up all night. I just loved it and blown away by it. And I think that was a big influence in me into falling in love with storytelling, doing what I do now.
The shared context that people like me and Ty have, because there was this narrow availability, that's not a thing anymore. That's there's not that automatic shared context the way that there used to be.
And I miss that. Because one of the things I loved, we had Thomas Jane on a few episodes back, and we started talking about Alien, and he was talking about how powerful that movie was to him. But then he went to school the next day and he brought the books, and that's what everybody talked about. And so for me, one of the best parts of this job is working with people that you can spend hours and hours and hours talking about these movies and these things that influenced you and the things that you love and why you do it. Because when I was a kid, you would go, and then all your other friends, they were watching the same things, and you could talk about it for hours and hours and hours. But now, if I talk to somebody younger than me or whatever, they have so many different options and so many different things, and from time period, that there's not this one conversation about. Every now and then something like the Queen's Gambit or something that would be popular, that you could actually have that conversation about something that everybody's watching and everybody's loving. And that's one of my favorite things. One of the reasons that we're doing this is to kind of go back and talk about The Expanse, but also talk about all the things that influence The Expanse and that people that like The Expanse also like. And so that continuing conversation, like I miss that. I still, to this day, if I see something that I love, I have a round of friends that I just call and like, have you seen this yet? And then like, let's talk about it. Let's break it down, So, but I think the conversation, those, three dominant channels where all the same stuff was on that everybody watched it, that's kind of going away.
No, that's gone. That's vanished.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it does. I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently is what this does to the audience. We always talk about, folks like you and me and Ty, the creators, the performers, the folks who are putting the stuff on the screen. We don't spend a lot of time talking about how important the audience is, and how important it is to have the right audience, and how important it is to have a sophisticated, educated audience, so who understand what the kind of tropes and expectations of something are.
What was it about The Expanse that really, because it's a science fiction show and it came out, but it really has caught on in a lot of ways? And I see people all the time out in town or doing whatever that's like, hey man, I usually don't watch science fiction, but it was quarantine or Christmas, and we decided to give it a try, and we love the show and we really connect to it. Is it because there's all these stories under the science fiction umbrella?
I think that's part of it. I also think that one of the conversations Ty and I had when we were really first looking at doing the books was, we talked a lot about what the project was. We talked about what exactly it was we were trying to do with the story. And one of the things we talked about was accessibility. We were making it something that you didn't have to have a deep, sophisticated knowledge of a whole genre in order to make sense of. There was a period in science fiction novels, I think especially, and this is, I'm stealing this from Ty because I hang out with him a lot, and everything he says that's smart I grab for myself. There was a period when science fiction novels especially became very insular. They became very sophisticated. They became very interested in making sure that the right readers got it. And people who were not the right readers didn't get it. And that was kind of when everybody went over and started reading fantasy instead. We tried to make this a science fiction story that people who didn't write or didn't read science fiction could still enjoy.
I have a theory about whenever somebody says they hate or they don't like an entire genre of something. And it comes from my belief about tequila, which is when you meet somebody and they say, "Oh, I don't like tequila." What they mean is they've had shitty tequila, and so they don't like tequila. So when somebody says like, "I don't like sci-fi," what I generally think they mean is I've watched some really terrible sci-fi, and it was terrible, and I didn't like it. Whereas people who love sci-fi have great affection for the really terrible sci-fi. So you're like, if somebody really loves tequila, you hand them some shitty tequila, they're still going to drink it. So for us, I feel like if we can get people to take a sip of The Expanse, even the people who generally don't like sci-fi go, "Oh, this is not what I thought. This isn't 1970s Buck Rogers with Gil Gerard doing spin kicks. This is something else. This is Scotch." But getting people to take that first sip when they've sort of written off an entire genre of something can be tricky.
What was interesting with the Expanse journey and seeing from season 1 all the way now to season 5, how it's grown, how it's connected to people, how we started with a foundation, a really solid, loyal fan base, and then it built off of that, and to see that grow. But even 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when we started this series, the landscape have changed so much. And I think about, and I wonder about books, and you guys know this, is how do books get anybody's attention now?
Mostly you don't. Most books fail. I mean, the vast majority of books that come out will have fewer than 1,000 readers and vanish.
For a while there, I was really tracking sales statistics and book scan statistics, which is the automated systems tell you how many books you sold. It's really inaccurate, but you can kind of learn some trending stuff from it. And the thing I figured out is at the time when I was doing this research, Amazon had something like 6.5 million books, 6.5 million titles on Amazon that were available. And if you sold to be in the top million of titles, you had to sell 1 book a month, which means that 5.5 million titles on Amazon sell fewer than 1 book a month.
Wow.
So you're talking about trying to cut through the noise. That's it right there. I mean, if you're one of those 5.5 million books, literally no one is buying your book.
So what was it about The Expanse?
The cover was huge. Actually, honestly, Ty's right. The art was both clearly a space opera, so you knew what you were getting into, but it was bright. It wasn't dark. It was like this vibrant blue, and then some brilliant graphic designer at Orbit put this bright pink type on it, and you could just see that thing from across the room. It was amazing.
And we got good early word of mouth. And honestly, that is how books sell now. There's the 2 ways that books sell now is 1, you're already famous. If Neil Gaiman puts out a book, if Stephen King puts out a book, if Diana Gabaldon puts out a book, J.K. Rowling puts out a book, everybody runs out and buys that book because you know who they are, you know what you're getting, you just buy the book. The other way that you sell books now is word of mouth. And there's a whole ecosystem online built up around word of mouth. There's, Goodreads and Library Thing, which are websites that people can go and do their own reviews on and stuff. There's a lot of book blogs. There's a lot of YouTube channels that are book YouTube channels. And so that's how you really start to roll the stone down the hill is a few people read it. They really love it. They go on, Goodreads and they write up reviews and they go, "Oh, this was great." And then a book blogger writes about it. And then somebody does a YouTube video about it and they hold up the book and say, "I loved this book." And at some point you get some momentum from that, but it's just really hard to get that first couple of people to notice you.
And it is luck in the sense that it's not something you can engineer. You can't, there's not somebody you can say, oh, well, here are the 5 steps we take in order for make this a New York Times best-selling novel, and then we'll just do that every time, and everything we do will make a New York Times best-selling novel. If they knew how to do that, they do it, and they can't. They don't.
One of the things I love Ty's description of the TV show The Expanse, where he says it's just an expensive commercial for his books.
Yeah, the joke is that you spend a few $1 million on advertising, you can sell literally thousands of books.
This was a great conversation. I mean, the reason to do this is get to see you guys and hang out and then talk and tell stories. And, we're probably doing, it's probably going to be boring as shit for the fans, but at least we're enjoying it.
That's the title of my autobiography. Boring as shit for the fans, but at least I'm enjoying it.
All right, guys, join us next time. We're going to be discussing 509. Please like and subscribe down here and tell us what you think. Also, if you get a chance, check out tyandthatguy.com.